Hello and welcome. This is Heavy Business. I'm Aaliyah.
I'm Curtis.
And today we have Sophia Fras back on along with Randy Ojeda. Thank you both for joining us today to talk a little bit more about music law.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And you got my name perfectly right. The pronunciation was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. Well, I want to start with a very important question. What is your favorite law related movie and why is it Legally Blonde?
That honestly, it's for me, it's 100% Liar Liar. I think
Oh,
that's my
it's a good
favorite law
one.
movie, and surprisingly one of the more accurate ones, I think. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, keep
No,
that
I
in
don't know
mind next
about
time I watch it.
that. I don't know about that, but yeah, Liar Liar for sure. Yeah, Legally Blonde. Sophia's Legally Blonde your favorite? I'm afraid to
Yeah,
ask.
it's Legally Blonde or The Firm with Tom Cruise.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, I haven't seen The Firm in a long time.
yeah.
I love Legally
Yeah.
Blonde. It's one of my favorite movies. So,
Yeah, my friends refer to me as Metalhead Elle Woods.
oh, what a compliment.
That is awesome.
But for real, I guess we should start with an introduction, actually. We had Sophia introduce herself last time she was on the podcast. So, Randy, if you would be so kind as to give us a little bit of background on how you got into law, why you're focusing on music law, and yeah, what you do in the realms of metal.
Yeah. So, I had a pretty unique path to the law. So, I went to law school first. Before I did, obviously before I became a lawyer, I had to go to law school. But regardless, I went to law school, and while I was in law school, I think in about the end of my first year, beginning of my second year, I started managing a rapper, as one does, when you're in law school, and I
Is that a
managed.
common thing?
I was just gonna ask. No, it's totally out of left field. But I was living in Chicago at the time. That's where I went to law school, and I just got to know a lot of like rappers and producers in the area, and just kind of started following into that scene. And then I was managing in hip hop for a little while, and then just kind of shifted gears and started my own management company, which was more focused on like punk rock, heavy music, indie rock, the kind of stuff that like I grew up. I'm a bass player, so I played in punk bands and metal bands like growing up, so I wanted to do something. I wanted to work in, a field that was more me, so I did that for a long time. Um, and at its peak, I was managing 10 bands, which, if you can think about it, was like way too many bands. But all my bands were doing really well. They were, we were, heavily touring. Like I had some artists that were on the road like 200 days out of the year, so a lot of like heavy touring, um and then the pandemic happened, and obviously like touring just ceased to be, and so I went from being the busiest I'd ever been to not busy at all. So I figured if I was ever going to sort of shift my gears back to law and what I originally went to school for, the pandemic was the time to do it, so it kind of forced my hand in that sense, and I took the bar exam and immediately started this firm. And just because I've been in the music industry for so long, I also did A&R for a distribution company, and I wore several hats in the industry. So um, I yeah, I was it was pretty easy to pick up clients and start working with people and start working with artists. And I always say that I'm genre agnostic, so I will do any, I'll work with any genre as long as it's like cool and genuine music. But I would love to do more metal and more heavy music. I work with a couple of heavy labels, um, and some artists, but I would definitely love to do more. So if you're listening to this or watching this, and you need a music lawyer and you're playing in a heavy band, let me know. You know.
Well, on that note, what are some key signs that bands should be attuned to know if they are ready to hire a music lawyer?
It's a great question. Great question. So first off, I would argue that every band needs a music lawyer at the beginning, because every band needs a band agreement. So that's like the one thing where I'm every time I meet a new band, I'm like, do you guys have a band agreement? And 90% of the time, the answer is no, because bands don't think that they need it. And it's, basically it's a band agreement is like a basic document that says, who owns the band name, who owns the songs, what percentages does everybody get of royalties, of publishing, of ownership, all these questions that, like, if you're a solo artist, it's easy because you're getting everything at first and then you start splitting the pie. But as a band, you need to decide from the very beginning, like, what is the plan here. And it's a lot easier to decide that when you're all friends, when the band's just starting, when things are new, than when you're at each other's throats, or somebody quits or something happens and suddenly you're in a situation where it's like, well, I don't know, can I take the band name and go, find 3 more friends and start a new band, or do these other guys own this band name? Or, can I play these songs? Can I re-record these songs? Who owns the songs? Who owns the recordings that we made? Who owns, there's so many questions that you just need to, simply figure out. And I tell bands too, like, I mean, I will put together a band agreement for you, but, at the very least, like, write something down amongst yourselves and, hire a lawyer just to look it over and make sure it looks okay. It doesn't need to be a super formal document. It just needs to, answer some basic questions about ownership of music and copyright and your intellectual property.
I was just about to ask, can you, like, if a band doesn't have the money to hire a lawyer, could they do one sufficiently amongst themselves that would still be legal?
Yeah, I mean, whatever you put together would still be legal. You just might be missing some obvious, or obvious to me and Sophia, like, obvious you know clauses or sections of the contract that, you might not be thinking about all the potential contingencies that would come up. And that's where we come in. But, I tell artists it's the same way with split sheets too. Like, when you're in the studio with somebody, even if you just take a napkin and write down, like, 50% is going to go to me and 50% is going to go to Curtis or whatever, even if you just write that down on a napkin, it's better than not saying it, and not having it written. But just having an idea of where, stuff is going to be allocated is going to save a lot of headaches in the future.
So
Yeah,
that's
I
one.
worked with a band a while ago during the pandemic, and I was kind of a quasi-manager for them. There was never like a formal agreement or anything, but they broke up very soon because they just could not decide who owned what, who would be contributing what to the songs. They just kept fighting over these things, and all of that probably could have been avoided if they had written something down from the start and had
Yeah,
all agreed on it. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
So yeah, to go back to your question, Aaliyah, um obviously you should have a lawyer from the very beginning for your band agreement. Let's say, you don't, you're not there yet where you feel like you need to hire a lawyer. At least do the band agreement. But beyond that, when you should be looking for a lawyer is whenever anybody else is coming into the picture. So whether that be a manager, an agent, a record label, especially if it's a record label, like, that's when you should be hiring a lawyer. Anytime somebody else is coming in to, get a percentage of what you do, or you're going to pay somebody for a service or whatever it is, you should have a lawyer involved. Even sometimes with, like, publicists, you should have.
Really? Because we've never had to involve a lawyer in anything with anything we've ever done.
Yeah, no,
We just
but
get paid.
yeah, well,
Contracts.
you must be doing something right.
I guess. I don't know.
You
Now,
know.
now you're making me wonder, though. But
No, I just kind of threw that in there. It's
hey,
I'm
if
just
it's
messing
valid,
with you,
if it's
Curtis.
valid, if
Well,
it's valid, it's
generally
valid.
speaking, publicists do not take a percentage
No,
or,
we
or
just
any
get
kind
what
of
we
Of
pay.
ownership
course, yeah,
of the
and
music.
a publicist deal should be pretty straightforward, where
Yeah.
it's,
I take
you're
money.
getting
I
paid X
provide a
amount
service.
for your service,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But you know, you never know. There's so many crazy deals out there, and people taking advantage of artists in ways that, I don't know what a publicist could potentially throw at
Oh,
you.
I could think of some rip-off artists right now. I could tell you off the stream, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, they're out there. And it's like, once you start growing a little bit as a band, like, I was just talking to a band who landed a couple Spotify playlists with their latest release, and now all of a sudden the people are coming out of the woodwork with, oh, we can up your streams by 10 times, and we can do this and we can do that, and all this stuff. And most of it is going to be scams. That's just how it is.
Well, without getting too deep into scams, because me and Sophia ranted about this, I think it was yesterday or the day
Oh
before.
yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
without getting too heavily into the scam aspect of things, what would be some examples of potential things like that they should consult a lawyer about?
Yeah, I mean, specifically, like, when, um, if anytime somebody's asking for a percentage, or anytime somebody's asking for an upfront payment on something, those are kind of the two areas where, before you hand somebody over your money, you should, talk to a lawyer, A, make sure it's legit, and B, if you need an agreement, make sure you have an agreement, I think back to do you guys watch the show Dave on FX?
I don't.
I don't know. It's the Little Dicky show. He's a rapper, but he like sends in like one of the first episodes, he wires like $5,000 to somebody named like P Money or something,
I've seen shit
like
like this. Yeah.
with no contract or no nothing. He doesn't even know this guy's name, and he just sends over, $5,000 or whatever it is, and um, kind of gets screwed at the end. Spoiler alert, but that kind of thing happens all the
Shocker.
time. Where
I've seen
artists
it.
will hit me up and be like, yeah, I gave, especially in hip hop, it's like artists will be like, oh, I gave so and so, $2,000, and he was supposed to send me a beat, and then you never got the beat. It's like, well, did you have an agreement? Did you involve management? Did you talk to their label? Like, did you go through any of these steps? No. Well, I just saw a DM on Instagram, and I cashed apped him. It's like, well, and there you go, you know and that kind of thing, people will call me all the time with that exact story.
You think you'd use something that you could get your money back with at least, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so just one more question just on this. So without going into any details, what's the most shocking example you've seen of someone getting ripped off that they could have avoided by talking to a lawyer? Without going into details, obviously, just
Yeah.
general. I want to hear it if you're
um
willing to say.
uh Man, I wish there's so many names I want to drop right now. So many artists
I,
that like
I'm
are
I want to
totally
hear
not
that
asking for that.
too.
no, I'm not doing that. It's just, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of scammers out there, but um yeah, I guess I don't know. I've seen, these like quote unquote labels, offering deals that they've never actually, like, labels that have never actually attempted to pay for the art, pay the artists what they're owed, and then you reach out to them for accounting, and they like get super mad. It's like you're the one bugging them for an accounting update, or to see their books or whatever, and they're you know like they don't have books. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people signing these record deals to labels that just aren't real labels. Like they're not doing the things that labels are supposed to do. I know
A
that's kind of like a
recent one.
general one, but what's that, Sophia?
A recent one.
Oh, that's not even a bad one. I know what you're talking
Really?
about. Yeah, that by comparison, like there's some
Oh
label deals
boy.
out there that are, it's not that they're asking for a lot, it's just that they don't even deliver on what they
Mm,
ask for, you know?
yeah.
Um,
What would
so
you call an unreal label? Because in metal, there's a lot of labels that are
A lot of super
labels.
underground independent labels.
Yeah, well, there
yes,
is in rap,
yes,
Sure.
but in hip hop. But how what would you define as being like an actual label? Because a lot of labels want money up front for printing costs, and So I just want to hear
sure.
your kind of thought on this before we continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what I mean. Like, it can be especially tough with these really small independent
Yep,
labels, because you know, running a label is hard, and I think a lot of times it's not even like a malicious thing where they're trying to screw over the artist.
agreed.
They just legitimately don't know. They don't know what they don't know. You know, um, but I think to be a real label, you just have to you have to actually put out the releases. So that's the first thing. Like, can you
Big
get
number one.
yeah, can you get the release, whether it be a digital distribution deal or a physical distribution, can you get the release from point A to point B? That's like step one. And then step two, can you market the release? So are you doing something more than just posting an Instagram image and saying, hey, here's this album? Like, are you doing ad buys? Are you pitching to Spotify and Apple Music and these different platforms? Are you doing something more than what the artist could just do by releasing it on DistroKid or whatever? So that's step two. And then step three, and this is the biggest part and the part that a lot of people miss, is you need to have your accounting correct and you need to have the money right. So, even if it's just $20 that you owe the artist, or even if you never recoup, like let's say you put in, 10 grand to put this record together and it only sold back 4 grand or whatever, as long as you can show the artist like, look, this is the money, this is where the money went, then you're a real label. But until you do that, like and if you're missing one of those three things, then it's just a hobby and a passion project.
Okay, so here's a scenario. You tell me if this would make sense. So Sophia gets offered a contract right now for Exile
Congrats,
Hope.
Sophia.
She gets offered a contract by a label. What should she be looking for in that deal? Right now, they want to release it on CD. What should she be looking for?
Yeah, so the main things are the ownership, the timing, and termination. Like, how can you get out of it? So the first thing is ownership. So who owns the songs? Are you giving them these master recordings for them to own it, or are you owning your music and licensing it out to them for a certain number of years or whatever it may be? So that's the first question, is who owns the music. Second is, how long is the term? How long do they own the music for? Are they getting the masters 100% for 20 years? Are they getting it in perpetuity? Are they getting it for 5 years? What's the ownership? And then termination, what steps need to happen in order for you to get out of this deal? So if they don't pay, for 6 months or a year or 2 quarters or however long it is, can you exit the deal? If they fail to, put out your record in a certain amount of time, like let's say you want your record to come out before the end of the year and they put it on the shelf, for an extra 2 years or whatever it is, can you leave that deal and release it with somebody else in a sooner time? Those are the three main questions: ownership, length, and termination. Who owns the records, how long do they own it for, and how do you get out of this deal if something goes sour, or not, or maybe how do you get out of the deal if you just want to get out of the deal?
Okay, so Sophia and Leah's band are both getting signed. So what of those things that you just talked about are the main red flags they need to be watching out for?
Main red flags.
Because you mentioned like the rights and stuff, length of time, like what's bad in these types of things, if you're willing to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think unless a label is putting out a ton of upfront money, so that unless they're giving you a really big advance, they should never own, and even then they probably shouldn't own the masters, but never should a label own the masters if you're just giving them the music to put out. Like, if they're not paying a bunch of upfront money, you want to license your music as opposed to sell your music. Like, you want to license it out for a period of time, and that can be anywhere from, I've seen deals that are as short as 3 years to as long as 10, 15, 20 years of licensing. But then when you're licensing the music out, you still retain ownership of it. So you're just giving this record label the license to promote this music on your behalf for this X amount of time, and then they'll get whatever their percentage is. So that's like the main thing, especially for smaller, rock bands, metal bands, like, smaller labels. Like, you want to make sure that you're licensing your music and not selling it to them, so that's like red flag number one. Red flag number two is the word perpetuity. If you ever see the word perpetuity, like, that's usually going to be a red flag. That's not something you want to, you don't want to just give your life work away for forever. You want some sort of ownership return, whether that be, the license deal or actual like ownership coming back to you. even if it's 20 years, it sounds like a long time, but trust me, in 20 years, you'll appreciate it, much more than in perpetuity. So, and then the last red flag I would think is just deals that are, like really restrictive in terms of getting out of them. Like there's some deals where, the deal will go on for a year and then it'll renew for like 3 years or 4 years or something like that. And it's like, why does it renew for such a long time after this initial period? Or deals where you specifically have to recoup, like, because most deals they'll say like you have to recoup whatever we've put in before you can get out of the deal. But sometimes they'll say like you need to recoup 10 times whatever we advance, or X amount of whatever we advance before you can leave the deal. And those are the types of red flags you got to stay away from, because that can be tough to do. So
no kidding. I'll let Aaliyah ask a question since I've been hogging the time.
Thank you, Curtis. But that was all really good information. And I want to get to asking about how the lawyers are getting paid, because it's easy to see the benefits of getting the advice and getting help from a lawyer, but what can bands be expecting to invest in this, and or how do lawyers get paid for this kind of service?
Yeah, totally. So there's a couple different ways, and every lawyer is a little bit different. The different ways that I do it is, for a lot of clients it's just strictly hourly. So you're paying for my time, whether that be time that I'm working on a document for you or reviewing it, or time that we're actually physically sitting together and discussing and consulting. And I think for me, that's the consulting aspect is something I really enjoy and I really look forward to, because I've been in the industry for a long time as a manager, wearing other hats. So sometimes artists just want to talk for an hour about where their career is going and what their goals are and what they want to do, and they don't have anybody in a professional capacity to do that with. So that's one aspect. That's one way that lawyers get paid is by hourly charges. And you can go on my website and you can actually book me for a virtual hour if you want. So we can do this essentially, via Zoom or Google Meet, and we can talk for an hour or a half hour, whatever. So that's one way. Another way is you have a lawyer on retainer, and that's where you'll pay up front, and then as work comes in, the lawyer will do that work and then take the money from that upfront payment. That's definitely good for bigger projects, and a lot of like bigger projects I do require a retainer just to make sure that the client can pay. Because I know how independent artists are, and budgets can be tough. So I'd rather know from the very beginning, like, okay, we're gonna do this for X amount, and this is how much time I'm gonna allocate to this, and this is how much time you're gonna get from me. So it's easier to do that up front. And then for some clients, and this is getting more rare in the industry, just as things kind of change, but for a lot of artists it really does still work and make sense. But for some clients, I'll do a percentage basis. So it's kind of like a management deal where or an agency deal or something, where I'm getting a percentage of whatever royalties are coming in exchange for doing all the legal work that comes in. And this is that can really make sense for certain artists that are very high volume, or doing, releasing a lot of music, putting out a lot of content, collaborating a lot with other artists, that can make sense. But a lot of times for bands, that doesn't make sense, just because it's like, you need me more sparingly than like a record, like a hip hop producer who's like producing 100 beats a day and needs deals all the time. It's like, it can be different, So,
I have a question though. So how much should they be allocating for a budget approximately? Not like obviously,
Yeah, that's a good question, because I mean I don't know what like people pay in different markets, so it's hard to say. I mean, I guess
Fair.
it depends on the attorney,
Fair. Should they be looking in the thousands of dollars, I guess is what I'm asking, or in the hundreds of dollars?
It depends on what it is. It
Fair.
depends on what it is, but I mean, I know that like, especially for newer artists and independent artists, like I'll work with their budget. It's like if you're signing a record deal and you're not getting an advance and like, you're not it's a small label or whatever, like I'm not going to charge you thousands of dollars to review the contract because that just doesn't make sense. So I like to, be flexible. And that's why I take payment in different ways because, we can work something out that makes sense for everybody. And that's also the benefit of being a solo attorney at a small firm, that I can have that flexibility. Whereas the larger firms, they got to make their quotas and they're not going to be able to, cut a deal for an artist. So
I have a
Cool.
quick question. Quick question. You are licensed in Florida, right?
mm,
So are you able to work with bands that are not Florida-based bands, or do you have to
yeah,
limit
yeah.
yourself to?
Yeah, totally. And actually I was just talking about that today. Like most of my clients, I want to say like 80% or so are outside of Florida. And that's just because music is federal law. So it's not state specific. There are certain things that I can't do, and I can't like enter a courtroom in different states, which I wouldn't want to do anyways. But in terms of, you know, contracts and transactional work and negotiating and consulting, which is what I do, like, as long as I'm licensed in a state, then it's fine.
What about for like, let's say if a band from another country needed help with something, but it was involving an American company, would that make sense?
Yeah, that could make sense.
Okay.
Sophia and I were just talking about this today, I think actually, right?
Yeah.
About like the international rules. And that's something where, it hasn't really come across my desk yet that I've worked with bands internationally. But I imagine if they were doing business here and they were working here in the US, then then that would be fine.
Cool. Okay. Aaliyah had a different angle, but if you want to do yours,
I lost it. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So what I wanted to talk about really, really quickly was, okay, so like let's say band gets a contract with a label or something like that. They're starting their negotiations and stuff. So should they be having a lawyer involved right off the bat, or should they just let their manager handle it, or like what do you advise on this type of thing?
Obviously, like it's whatever they can afford.
Okay.
So if you can afford an attorney to start in from the beginning and work the deal from the very beginning, I'd say that's always the best way to go. Even with your management, like if you have management, like I think it's still a smart idea to bring a lawyer in from the very beginning, just so that you know you can get the best deal possible. But if if budget is an issue, or you really have faith in your management or whatever it is, then you can hire a lawyer at the end of the deal to review it and make sure, redline it, make sure there's no red flags. The only thing is at that point it's a lot harder. Like if your deal is not good, it's a lot harder for me to go back and be like, man, like you could have gotten 15%, but instead you're getting this, whatever it is. Like, I it's hard once you've been negotiating for a while, it's hard to go back to the table and say like, well, now as the lawyer I'm saying that this should be only 20% or whatever it is. That's a lot harder to do than in the beginning. You can hire a lawyer and start setting those precedents and anchoring yourself accordingly so that you're getting the best deal that you can. you know
So I guess they should get a lawyer who's also a manager then.
that hey,
Speaking
that
of,
doesn't
yeah,
doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Yep.
that was the topic that I wanted to dive into actually, because Sophia
Yeah.
and Randy, you both have experience managing bands, and yeah, um, and I wanted to know, how does that connect with the law aspect, and or how does it inform your knowledge as a lawyer in training?
Sophia, you go for it.
Yeah. Well, I was telling Curtis earlier that music law, at least from my experience, hasn't been so much that, oh, this is outright illegal or this is outright wrong. It's more like you need to get really familiar with the industry in order to understand what the standards and conventions are, so that when you come across like a record deal or a collaboration agreement, you understand what the standards are and how you can negotiate within and around those standards to push for a better deal. So it's not necessarily that like a label or a collaborator will be doing something that's outright wrong. It's just that depending on your level of experience in the music industry, you have a better eye for what you could potentially do better, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. That's right on. Yeah, and I think to your question, Aaliyah, like there's a lot of overlap between being a manager and being a lawyer. But I think as a lawyer, you're just brought in for specific deals generally. And as a manager, you're really doing, you're doing branding, you're doing marketing, you're pitching the band, you're doing kind of everything involved in working with a band versus as a lawyer, you're just more focused on like specific deals, which for me has been great because, I said at the beginning of the podcast that I was, at the height of my management company, I was managing 10 bands. That was like, I was working like 80-hour weeks, with 10 bands, but like now, as a lawyer, like I can take on a lot more clients and a lot more artists because, I'm not dealing with the nitty gritty. I'm not, getting a 2 a.m. phone call because somebody just broke up with their significant other and they don't want to tour anymore. I'm not getting those calls.
I get those.
Oof.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Curtis has
Yeah.
too personal a relationship with his PR clientele.
Yeah. Yeah.
That can be good too,
Depends. I had a quick question just on that though. So okay, so with the management stuff versus the legal stuff, so you can take on more clients this way. Is there some type of quality check you have to do with the client, just out of curiosity, other than can they pay?
I personally do a quality check. Yeah.
Like what do you like
That's
what does that consist of for law?
Yeah. I mean, it's for me, and it can definitely depend on what the situation is, but for the most part, like, as a lawyer, I also, want to help my clients in other ways besides just doing the law and doing the consulting and the strategizing. Like if I can, connect an artist with an agent, or if I can connect an artist with a label or something like that, I want to be able to do that. So I don't want to represent stuff that isn't good, and then have that be my name on the line when, even just emailing other attorneys and other people in the industry, like, if I'm emailing about a client, I want that client to be good. I don't want to
I feel
be
this.
bothering people with stuff that, I don't stand behind. And again, like I am genre agnostic. So like, sometimes people have to tell me like I don't really listen to electronic music very much, but like if somebody tells me like this dude's like a really good DJ, or she's like a really good DJ, or whatever it is, like, you know, I'll listen to that, Um,
Well, let me
but
ask you this. So let's say, but okay, so like if it's not good, so you'll actually listen to the client prior to taking the money. Is that what you're saying? That's awesome.
usually, yeah,
Okay.
that's like, it's even in my consultations, like my initial consultations, like one of the first questions I ask is, can you put a link to your music? And you best believe before that meeting, I'm going to be listening to your music,
Oh, I
and if
thought
it's,
that was just for fun.
you thought it was just for fun. No,
Yeah.
that's on purpose. Like I want to
I
have
would
some
just
context to
I'm
what
just
we're doing.
surprised
And
the lawyer's saying this because we do that for PR. I just wasn't even thinking you guys would be doing that. I thought,
yeah, and I think for me it's a bandwidth thing too, because like I get a lot of people reaching out, and it's just how do I want to spend my time? Like, do I want to spend my time working on stuff that I like, or do I want to spend my time, just working stuff that can pay? And I'm not gonna lie and say that I've never taken on a client
we
just
all
because they
have.
can pay. Like sometimes
We've
you
all
have
done
to do
that.
it,
Yep.
you know. But in that case, I would be very open and honest about where my limitations are with the client. Like I would let them know, like, hey, like I can't really, I don't know if my contacts would, if I don't know if I can pitch this, or I don't know if I can share this with all my contacts or whatever it is, but you're having a legal issue, so I will help you if that's what it is, you know.
I know we're running out of time, but I got another quick question. I think it's a
Yeah,
quick
you can
question.
finish us out, Curtis.
Cool. So, like, what other type of qualifications do you have other than just the music? Do you check if they're offensive, if they've been in legal trouble before? Like, what do you do? Like, if Vince Neil is coming to you from Motley Crue, he's already like killed some guy, you know, what do you do?
um, I don't know.
Well,
I
like, what do you
haven't been
like?
in that situation.
Well, like, do you background check guys, or like, how does it work? Like,
No, I mean, not, I typically Google search people and, check their
fair.
Spotify and their social medias and stuff like that. But, um, I don't typically background check people. I just, I wouldn't take on somebody that's like super offensive or,
Yeah.
like I'm not a very political person, but like I
Yeah.
wouldn't take on somebody with like really radical politics that I disagree with. So,
Okay.
yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't want to say anymore on that. I just want,
Fair. Fair.
but most of the people that, I'm pretty open about, like, I'm a very, like, inclusive person, and I like to work with people of different backgrounds and everything. So I'd hope that the clients that come to me tend to be of the same manner and pretty cool, but every now and then you get these people, especially in Florida, unfortunately, where I live, that are just, not somebody I want to work with.
So what if your Google?
Everybody knows the Florida Man headlines.
Yeah,
Everybody
and
knows.
that's real stuff, man. The Florida Man is not a joke.
Well, so what
Yeah.
do you do? So what do you do? You Google search the guy, you like the music, but then you find out they do have a crazy legal history. Is that just like you're gone, I don't want to deal with you type thing, or what?
No, I mean, I would still have a conversation with them. I'll talk to anybody, I guess, and see, what's going on. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but definitely, like, that can be a red flag. Like, if somebody's had too many lawyers, that can be a red flag for me too.
That's where
If
I was
somebody
trying to
that's
lead to find out if
yeah,
that was like, okay.
yeah, somebody who's like, oh, you're like the fifth lawyer I've called about, or I've hired for this or something like that. That's usually a red flag that, like, if the other lawyers couldn't get it done, I mean, you know, I'm, what can I do to better the situation, and then also typically if they've gone through that many lawyers, and I'm sure this, like, if they go through, so many publicists or so many
I won't touch them.
PR people. Yeah, it's like there's got to be a reason for it.
Yep.
Either the client's crazy or their expectations are out of whack,
Or they badmouth the earlier PR or something like that. Like,
yeah, those are all red flags. So,
Yep.
the moral of that story is to be cool to people. Don't be a jerk, and don't
Yeah.
don't get yourself into trouble.
In the words of one of the guys in Death Clock, don't be a dick, be a dude.
Yeah, 100%.
Do I have time for one more question, Aaliyah, or are we?
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask
Go
something
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have time. So if you guys have time, I'm cool.
I'm not the one with limited time. Aaliyah.
Yes, we just try to keep our episodes to be somewhat uniform in length.
I gotcha.
But
You'll just have to have me back then.
we
it's
will.
okay.
That's the trick. We cut off the podcast just a little early so that we can convince everybody to come back.
Yeah, leave them wanting more.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention that we didn't get to talk about at all was licensing music for TV shows, video games, other media.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit on that topic?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's like, if you ask me, that's the best way to make money in the music industry right now is, before the writers strike and all that, there was, so much content coming out from all the different streaming services, and, all of that needs, all of that is licensed music, that's necessary. So, licensing, I think, is one of the most lucrative things you can do as an artist and as a songwriter or producer, to have your music and, something that you own the publishing for or whatever in a TV show or a video game or a movie or something is massive. Not only just for the actual monetary value from it, but just that's a great way to make fans. Like, I've found so many cool artists just from watching a TV show that I like. So
right. Or like credits in movies. I used to get artists from there.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you know much about how bands can come about deals like that? Or are you more like you can help them make sure that it's a good one?
Both. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you know, it's the way that bands can do it honestly is um first off, do your research. So like know who you're targeting. Make sure you know like whatever show or movie you want to be on, or whatever music supervisor you're gonna pitch to. Make sure that they like the type of music that you make. So that's first off, and be specific, and really research it and reach out to these music supervisors and say, hey, here's my catalog, here's my music. Use the word one stop. Music supervisors like one stop. One stop means that like you can clear the whole song on your own. You don't have to clear with a record label or a publisher, or this person or this collaborator. You can just say like, hey, this is cleared. Because music supervisors, if they have one stop songs, like that's always going to get precedent over like, can we clear this thing that has 5 different songwriters and 2 publishers and 3 record labels? Or can we email Sophia and say, Sophia, we want your song? And she says yes. And then it's licensed, it's done. So let the music supervisors know it's one stop. Send them your catalog. Use something like SoundCloud or Disco. Disco is really good. DISCO. It's a great way to share unreleased files and catalogs and large quantities of music. A lot of music supervisors use Disco. And Disco makes it easy because you can just add straight from a Disco link. You can add all the music to your library at once. So that's like really huge. But yeah, send the music over to the music supervisors directly, and just pitch yourself, and it could take it could take years before they need your music. But if you're accurately describing it, and they'll add it to their library, and you never know when they might need that specific sound. Like they might specifically need a black and doom metal band, like, and then there you go, you're in. But as long as you do the research up front, and the same thing goes honestly for pitching anybody in the industry, for labels, for publicists, for whoever you're trying to work with, like do the research first and make sure that
Yes.
they're in the wheelhouse that you're in.
Just in general, to avoid a fucking scam, do your research. At least do a Google search of the person you're talking to.
Yeah,
to
at
make
least.
sure.
Yeah,
because otherwise you get the Cash App scams like you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, the Cash App scams. Yeah, they but licensing is great. We were talking earlier. I have a client who's has a song that's getting licensed on an Amazon series. I can't say more about it, but I was very surprised and happy that Amazon offered quite a bit of money for to use the song, which is incredible. So a lot of streaming services try to lowball you. I know, like, Netflix is kind of notorious for that, for not paying that much for music budgets, but this is the first Amazon check I've seen, and I'm happy with it. So, go Amazon, I guess.
I have a question on this. I guess this is my final question now, but I was going to ask something else. How does that work? So the lawyer negotiates this large fee. What do you guys get out of it? Do you guys just still take your hourly rate, or do you guys get something extra for that, if you're willing to say?
Usually for something like that, I'll do a percentage.
Cool.
So a percentage of whatever the fee is,
Cool.
Which is, if you want to break it down, like that's the unfortunate part of the industry, and why, like, every point really matters. Because, let's say, you get $100,000, for your song, but then, half of that is probably immediately going to go to your record label because they own the master side, most likely, or they have the license to the master side, or at least 50% of it, whatever. Let's say they own the whole thing. Half of that's already going to go to the label. So now you're down to $50,000. Okay. And then there's 4 songwriters. So each songwriter is getting 25%, let's say, in a perfect world. Now you're down to, I don't know, what's the math on that? What's a quarter of 50,000?
I can't do math anymore. I have to use my phone.
Yeah.
1250?
Yeah, you're down to like 1250.
12.5.
Okay, so yeah, so you're in that ballpark, and then but then your manager is going to get 10%. Your lawyer is going to get somewhere between 5 and 7%, and then if you have a publisher, your publisher is probably going to get another 10%, you know, so you can just see how quickly, you know, you, the songwriter, ends up with very little money, you know, by the time everybody gets their cut, you know. So negotiating an extra 2% or 1% or 3%, it may seem frivolous at the time, but that can be the difference between, you know, a couple $1,000s or something, you know. So and that's also why it's important to keep as much of the pie as you can, you know.
And the best kind of pie is,
Ooh.
what do you think?
I'm gonna be a Florida boy and go key lime pie.
I
Hey,
agree.
all
You
right.
agree?
Good
Nice.
choice. Yeah.
Yeah, key lime pie is where it's at, but it's got to be good, real key limes, fresh key limes. You know, it can't be store bought stuff.
Oh yeah.
What do you think, Curtis? What's your favorite kind of pie?
Apple.
Wow, very American of you.
Very American.
Very American, and I'm Canadian. Yep.
Oh, gee, and I'm gonna go with pecan.
Nice.
And that's how I
What's
say it.
what's Canada's national pie? Like if it's American as national
Fucking no.
apple pie.
I don't
What's
know.
it's Canadian as
I've never
It's
heard.
maple syrup.
I was
Never
gonna say
heard.
maple syrup pie.
I don't think we have a national pie, but I'm now going to Google it once we get off the call.
Yeah, I'd like to try some.
I mean,
We have
maple
beaver
cream pie
tails.
sounds good.
We have
Like
beaver
sugar
tails.
cream pie, but maple.
No, there's
Mm.
beaver tails, which is like this breaded type. Anyways, I'll send you guys a link later.
All right. With that, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We will
Yeah,
have to
thanks
have
for
you
having me.
back to talk more in detail about other such topics.
Yeah, I can talk about anything as you can hear. But thanks so much for having me. It was really great. I've been, you know, following you guys on Instagram and Twitter and everything, and Sophia's been talking you up. So I'm excited to be part of the vibe, you know.
Heck yeah. Thank you,
Um,
Sophia, too. And thank you,
yeah.
Randy.
But yeah, and if you're watching this, follow me on all the socials at Real Randy Ojeda. Or you know, go to randyojedalaw.com. You can book some time with me. We can talk. We can do this. You know, you can recreate this podcast in your own home on your own with me.
Love it.
Just by booking me, you know.
Love it.
Very good. Very good. And everyone listening, thank you for listening. And now, and when you make your consultation call with Randy, remember to make like a bull and throw those horns up.